Bill Murray is trending worldwide right now, and the reason has left fans stunned. For decades, Murray has been Hollywood's most unpredictable legend, known for his dry wit, mysterious behavior, and refusal to play by anyone's rules. But what's pushing his name to the top of headlines today isn't a movie role, a joke, or a surprise appearance. It's something far more unexpected, and far more revealing. Behind the carefree persona and iconic comedy lies a story few truly understood. Whispers have followed Bill Murray for years. Sudden disappearances, unexplained decisions, and moments that confused even those closest to him. Now, new details are surfacing, connecting the dots in a way that changes how people see him forever. Fans who once laughed without question are now looking back with a very different perspective. This isn't a story about fame gone wrong or another celebrity scandal. It's about consequences, accountability, and a side of Bill Murray that was hidden in plain sight. The events unfolding right now are forcing Hollywood and the public to confront truths that were long brushed aside as just Bill being Bill. As social media explodes and reactions pour in from around the world, one thing is clear: this moment is bigger than a trending topic. It's a reckoning. And once you understand the reason Bill Murray is trending worldwide right now, you'll realize why so many people are shocked and why this story isn't going away anytime soon. For most of his career, Bill Murray existed outside the normal rules of Hollywood. He didn't have an agent like everyone else. He didn't follow press schedules. He showed up when he wanted, vanished when he didn't, and somehow made unpredictability part of his legend. Fans found it charming. Studios found it frustrating. But very few people questioned it, until now. The reason Bill Murray is trending worldwide didn't arrive overnight. It has been building quietly for years, buried beneath anecdotes that were once dismissed as eccentric behavior. Stories circulated about tense sets, uncomfortable encounters, and moments when Murray's humor crossed lines others felt powerless to challenge. For a long time, these incidents were treated as harmless quirks of a comedic genius. Today, they're being re-examined with a very different lens. What changed was timing and courage. Former collaborators, crew members, and insiders are now speaking openly, not with rage, but with clarity. They describe an environment where unpredictability created discomfort, where authority was blurred by celebrity, and where jokes sometimes masked behavior that left others unsettled. These accounts are not sensational or exaggerated. They are measured, consistent, and deeply uncomfortable. Murray's reputation had long protected him. His talent, his legacy, and his cultural status created a shield few dared to challenge. Directors hesitated to confront him. Studios hesitated to intervene. Those lower on the hierarchy often felt they had no voice at all. When incidents occurred, they were smoothed over, reframed as misunderstandings, or quietly ignored. That silence is now part of the story. Social media has amplified what once stayed confined to industry whispers. Old interviews are being rewatched. Past comments are being reassessed. Stories once laughed off now feel unsettling in hindsight. The public is beginning to ask a difficult question. At what point does charm stop excusing harm? This moment is especially jarring because Bill Murray's public image was built on empathy, irony, and emotional depth. His performances often portrayed lonely, reflective men grappling with their own flaws. Audiences related to him because he seemed human, vulnerable, and self-aware. That makes the current revelations even harder to reconcile. The gap between the persona and the reality feels wider than ever. To be clear, this is not a story about sudden collapse or cancellation. It is about accountability catching up to reputation. Murray has not been erased from history, nor has his work lost its cultural impact. But the conversation has shifted. Fans are no longer asking whether he was funny or talented. They are asking whether the industry enabled behavior it should have addressed long ago. Behind closed doors, Hollywood is nervous. Murray is not just one actor. He represents a broader culture where difficult behavior was tolerated as long as success followed. The spotlight now shining on him feels uncomfortably bright for many others who benefited from the same silence. As the story continues to unfold, one truth is becoming impossible to ignore. Bill Murray's unpredictability was never just harmless chaos. It existed in a system that rewarded power and minimized accountability. And now, for the first time, that system is being questioned in full view of the world. This is only the beginning. What comes next will determine whether this moment becomes just another headline or a turning point. Hollywood can no longer ignore as the spotlight intensified. The stories surrounding Bill Murray stopped feeling isolated and began forming a pattern. What were once brushed off as awkward moments or misunderstood jokes were now being examined collectively. And the similarities were impossible to ignore. Different productions, different years, different people. Yet the same themes surfaced again and again: power imbalances, discomfort masked as humor, and silence enforced by reputation. Those who spoke out did not describe Murray as a villain in the traditional sense. Instead, they painted a more unsettling picture: a man so protected by his status that boundaries slowly became optional. On set, Murray's behavior often dictated the atmosphere. When he was playful, everyone relaxed. When he crossed a line, no one quite knew how to respond. The confusion itself became a form of control. People laughed because they didn't know what else to do. Several crew members described how quickly situations could shift. A joke would land wrong. A comment would linger too long. A physical moment meant as humor would feel invasive instead. In those moments, hierarchy mattered. Murray was the star. Others were replaceable. That imbalance made confrontation feel risky, even dangerous. Careers in Hollywood are fragile, and few were willing to gamble theirs on calling out behavior everyone else seemed to tolerate. For years, the industry played a role in maintaining this silence. Studios prioritized smooth productions over uncomfortable conversations. Directors chose diplomacy over discipline. Human resources departments were often absent or ineffective on sets where celebrity power outweighed policy. When concerns were raised, they were minimized, reframed, or quietly resolved without consequences. The goal was always the same: keep the machine moving. What's changing now is perspective. The cultural tolerance for difficult geniuses has eroded. Audiences are no longer satisfied with charming explanations when real people describe feeling disrespected or unsafe. The same stories that once sounded like quirky trivia now feel like warnings that went unheeded. And Bill Murray's name, once synonymous with offbeat brilliance, has become central to that reassessment. The shock isn't just about what happened, it's about how long it was allowed to happen. Fans are grappling with the realization that laughter sometimes covered discomfort, and nostalgia softened truths that should have been confronted earlier. This doesn't erase Murray's work, but it complicates it. Watching old performances now carries an added layer of unease for some viewers, forcing them to separate art from accountability. Behind the scenes, Murray's circle has reportedly grown quieter. Defenders are more cautious. Public statements are carefully worded. There is an awareness that denial no longer works the way it once did. Silence, once protective, now feels conspicuous. Every non-response adds weight to the conversation rather than ending it. Yet this moment is not driven by outrage alone. It is driven by accumulation. By people who waited years to speak. By patterns that refuse to stay buried. By a cultural shift that finally allows uncomfortable truths to be heard without immediate dismissal. Murray didn't suddenly change, the world around him did. Reveals the heart of why Bill Murray is trending worldwide right now. It isn't one incident or one accusation. It's the collective realization that charisma can coexist with harm, and that talent does not negate responsibility. The shock comes not from discovery, but from recognition that what was once normalized should never have been, and as the conversation deepens, one question hangs in the air. Unanswered but unavoidable. If this reckoning can reach someone as untouchable as Bill Murray, who else is next? As the conversation around Bill Murray grew louder, it became clear that this moment was no longer about individual stories. It was about reckoning with a culture that had protected certain behaviors for far too long. Hollywood began to look inward, uncomfortable with what it saw reflected back. Murray's name carried weight not just because of who he was, but because of what he represented. An era where eccentricity was celebrated, power was rarely questioned, and accountability was optional for those deemed irreplaceable. What unsettled many observers was how familiar the patterns felt. The industry had seen this before: talented figures insulated by success, surrounded by enablers who confused admiration with permission. In Murray's case, unpredictability became a shield. His refusal to conform to norms was reframed as authenticity, his boundary-pushing humor dismissed as harmless. Over time, those narratives hardened into mythology, making it increasingly difficult for anyone to challenge him without being labeled humorless, sensitive, or expendable. The reassessment forced fans to confront their own role in the story. Audiences had rewarded the persona, laughing at stories of chaos and celebrating the idea that rules didn't apply to him. That admiration, however unintentional, helped sustain the imbalance. As old anecdotes resurfaced, many realized they had mistaken discomfort for charm simply because it came wrapped in fame. Nostalgia softened edges that should have raised questions long ago. Murray's silence during this period became its own form of communication. In the past, quiet had protected him. Now it intensified scrutiny. Each day without a clear response allowed speculation to grow and narratives to solidify. Industry insiders noted that this wasn't ignorance of the conversation, it was caution. Anything said now would be measured not against past standards, but against a culture that demanded accountability, clarity, and humility. Meanwhile, those who spoke up felt a shift beneath their feet. Where once they might have been dismissed, now they were being heard. Not universally, not without resistance, but enough to matter. Their stories weren't framed as attacks. They were framed as context. And context changed everything. It revealed how small moments repeated over time could shape an environment where people felt uneasy yet powerless to intervene. The broader implication unsettled Hollywood even more than the specifics. If someone as beloved and entrenched as Bill Murray could be questioned publicly, then no reputation was truly immune. Studios began revisiting policies. Sets reconsidered power dynamics. Conversations that once happened in whispers moved into open meetings. The industry's discomfort signaled something important. The old protections were weakening. For Murray himself, this moment threatened the narrative he had lived inside for decades. He was no longer the unpredictable outlier everyone accommodated. He was now a symbol in a larger conversation about responsibility and respect. That shift is difficult for anyone, but especially for someone whose identity had been built around exemption from scrutiny. Yet is not about condemnation, it's about complexity. People are not one thing, and legacies are rarely clean. Murray's work still matters. His performances still resonate. But the story around him has expanded, and expansion brings discomfort. It requires holding two truths at once: admiration for the art, and accountability for the impact. As the noise continued to build, one thing became undeniable. This wasn't a temporary trend or a fleeting outrage cycle. It was a recalibration. The rules had changed, and the industry was learning slowly, unevenly. That silence was no longer enough. The world wasn't just watching Bill Murray anymore. It was watching Hollywood decide whether this moment would lead to reflection or retreat. And that decision, more than any headline, would define what came next. As the dust begins to settle, it becomes clear that why Bill Murray is trending worldwide right now has less to do with a single moment and more to do with an overdue reckoning. This chapter of his story is not defined by outrage alone, but by reflection, by an industry and an audience forced to reconsider what they once accepted without question. The shock isn't that stories surfaced. The shock is that they were able to remain unexamined for so long. For Bill Murray, this moment represents a collision between legacy and accountability. His career was built on being different, on resisting systems and expectations. That resistance once felt refreshing, even heroic. But over time, the same traits that fueled admiration became shields against scrutiny. What once looked like freedom now looks, to many, like exemption. And exemptions, when examined closely, often come at someone else's expense. Hollywood is confronting an uncomfortable truth. Talent was allowed to outweigh behavior. Charm softened boundaries. Success rewrote rules. Murray did not create that system, but he benefited from it. And now that the system itself is being questioned, the protection it once offered is no longer guaranteed. This shift is not about erasing careers, it's about redefining responsibility. The public response reflects this complexity. Some fans feel betrayed. Others feel conflicted. Many are simply confused, trying to reconcile the artists they admired with the conversations unfolding now. That discomfort is part of the process. Reckonings are rarely clean. They force people to sit with contradiction, to accept that someone can be both influential and flawed. Celebrated and criticized. What stands out most is how quiet this moment feels compared to past scandals. There are no dramatic press conferences, no explosive denials. Just a growing awareness that silence, once protective, no longer resolves anything. The absence of clarity creates its own narrative, one shaped by patterns rather than statements. And in that space, interpretation takes over. For the industry, the implications stretch far beyond one name. Sets are rethinking power dynamics. Studios are reassessing how concerns are handled. Younger creatives are watching closely, learning what behavior is tolerated and what is no longer ignored. Bill Murray has become a case study, not because he is unique, but because he is familiar. His story feels like a mirror many would rather avoid. This chapter is not about punishment. It is about consequence. About understanding that impact matters more than intention, and that being beloved does not mean being beyond question. Murray's work still exists. His influence remains. But the conversation around him has matured, moving beyond mythology into something more grounded and honest. In the end, why Bill Murray is trending worldwide right now isn't shocking because it reveals something new about him. It's shocking because it reveals something old that everyone chose not to see. The world has changed, and with it, the expectations placed on those who hold power, whether they asked for it or not. This story will not end with a single verdict or conclusion. It will linger, shaping how audiences engage with art, how industries protect people, and how legacies are understood. And perhaps that is the most meaningful outcome of all, not destruction, but awareness.